Hey guys, it's Cecilia. Welcome back and Happy New Year. And today I'll be doing something very special, which I do in some form every single year, which is talking about my top 10 books of the year. So 2025 was a really good reading year. I don't know, I've been so really busy this year, but then I read a lot of good books. So first, let's look at some stats because I use Goodreads to track my reading, and then I got my reading of the year wrapped and got some stats for you guys. So this is going to be really exciting. Let's dive into it. First, I read 54 books in 2025. That is including both my personal reading and my required reading. But then I think that I didn't do much required reading in 2025 because most of it I read because I did part of the IBDP as well as English in college, but honestly, we didn't read that many books. It was mostly theory and short stories. And in IBDP, I think most of the books were finished in 2024. I did count the rereads though, and I will briefly mention the texts that we studied. So that will be until the end. So make sure that you keep watching and stay tuned. And of those 54 books, I read 14,273 pages. So yeah, that is my reading data for 2025. And now let's dive into my top 10 favorite books. I think that's so exciting because I had such a hard time picking those out. Especially, and this is weird because I had an easier time picking out the ones my top five, I would say, because my top five, they were already ingrained inside my mind and I knew exactly which books to choose. But then the next five were really hard to pick out because I was like, I really want to pick that in there, and no, but I really want to put that, and that's just been really hard to pick because I've read so many good books, some of the ones that I really liked but didn't think to include, well, didn't include in the end because there were better ones, as you will see on the list, or The Goldfinch, Americana, what else? I can't remember at this moment, but there are a lot of good books that I read in 2025. Oh yeah, also Death of a Salesman. Those in all those plays so incredible. But I couldn't include all of the books. I would say I enjoy a lot of the books that I read, and I give most of the things 4 or 5 stars. So my average rating on Goodreads that I gave in 2025 was 4.5 stars, and that says a lot since I do enjoy a lot of the books that I read. I think I only gave less stars than that to 1 or 2 books, and yeah, so I kind of have a knowledge of my reading style right now. And that's not because I'm not a strict grader in terms of the rating by stars, but I know what books that I like. So when I pick them up, I kind of know that I will like them. So let's get started. In 10th place, we have I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. And this book is absolutely beautiful. I would literally press it into the hands of all the young girls I know. It's such an inspirational and motivational story. It talks about Maya Angelou's story as a poet, her growing up as a Black girl in the South of the US. And it's such an inspirational story because it was during the Civil Rights Movement. So, of course, you would expect a lot of stories about segregation and fighting for her rights, and also about how she used poetry as a way to voice her ideas when she was silenced by a lot of these external forces. So I think it is absolutely beautifully written, as Maya Angelou is one of my favorite poets of all time, and her poetry is absolutely brilliant. But this book, it's her memoir that tells her childhood story, so it gives you so much context behind what motivated her to write the great poems that she did, as well as a little bit more about her life as a poet and how she came to love the art, instead of just her poetry itself, which is already brilliant. So I think this book gives such an interesting backstory, and absolutely loved it. The writing is, of course, exquisite, as always, by Maya Angelou. And some of my favorite quotes, I actually have most quotes from my 10th place book, but yeah, it's interesting. But I'm just gonna read some to you guys. For example, this is a piece of advice that Maya Angelou's mother gave her, which is hoping for the best, prepared for the worst, and unsurprised by anything in between. It sounds so simple, but it's actually something like a quote to live by, honestly. I feel like it's such good advice, and it is something that I will keep implementing into my life as well. Because I think in that one quote, it encapsulates a lot of messages about optimism, but also about preparedness, about also letting life take you wherever it wants to, and just think about fully savor and internalize the quote. And I feel like it's such an important message about appreciating and accepting the unpredictability of life, which is absolutely beautiful. The second quote that I absolutely loved is, "Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with shades of deeper meaning." And that is what I think is so beautiful about poetry, because everybody reads a book differently, everybody reads a poem differently, and what brings that difference is the human voice, is how you read it. So it's like you and the author having a conversation with each other instead of the author just telling you something through the book or through the poem. And I think it's a beautiful idea. That's why I've loved poetry recitals ever since I was really young, and I love reading parts of the book to people, because I feel like the act of reading out loud is kind of dying down. Especially as we grow older and as we have all sorts of technology and things, I feel like reading out loud is not as common anymore, but I feel like reading out loud, it infuses the words with your own voice, which is something super powerful. And another quote is, "There was shuffling and rustling around me, then Henry Reed was giving his valedictory address. To be or not to be? Hadn't he heard the white folks? We couldn't be, so the question was a waste of time." This, I feel like it encapsulates how absolutely heartbreaking the book is, because of all the constraints, all the racism, and all the horrible things that were going on at that time. And the fact that Angelou was able to overcome all of those and become a real good poet, that says so much about her strength of character, her personality, and her perseverance. And I think it's an absolutely beautiful story, but that quote just illustrates the terrible conditions of the time that did not allow young boys and girls that were Black or of people of color to think about a brighter future. In the end, this book is just a beautiful coming-of-age story, as well as a testament to Angelou's strength of becoming such a great poet. Oh, I'll also talk about the environments in which I was reading these books, because I feel like that is so important, and it helps me reminisce about the year a little bit too. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings I read in January of 2025, right after, well, I started reading it during winter break while I was in China, and coming back to Turkey, I just remember, like, on the first week of us being back to school, we had one day where it was early release, so we went home at midday on like a Wednesday, I think. And then that day, like, since I was done with all my college applications and had some IB stuff left to do, I was like, today is the perfect day where I'm gonna just read I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and also do some sewing and crocheting. And it was such a fun afternoon for me after all of the like busy times of like really hectic times of application season. So I think that's also part of the reason why I really enjoyed it, but it doesn't take away from the merits of the book itself, of course. Now, in ninth place, I have As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. As Good as Dead is the third book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. The reason why I have this book and not a lot of the others is because I just happen to be in my home in Istanbul, Turkey right now, and I moved several times this year. I moved from here to college, and also moved a lot of the things back to China in my permanent home, and so I'm sorry that I don't have a lot of the physical copies of these books that I'm mentioning right now, but yeah, this is one that I have. I love the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. It is so entertaining. It is super fun to read, as if you like any sort of mystery, if you like stories about smart girls accomplishing great things, and there's always such a big plot twist. There's a Netflix show about a Good Girl's Guide to Murder, this first book right now, but As Good as Dead specifically, I read it this year, so of course I had to include it in my favorite books list, as A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was on my last year's one. And also, I feel like As Good as Dead, it has this layer of depth to it that is not in the first two books, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder and Good Girl Bad Blood, because I think, without like giving away too much, I feel like As Good as Dead, it makes you think about a lot of deeper questions around mystery and around investigating these crimes and around what that does to a person. It involves very dark psychology, I would say. It is very scary, even though it's mystery and it's a YA mystery. It really feels like a thriller. I was so scared while reading this. And As Good as Dead, I started reading during the summer of 2025, and then I took it with me to college to finish it. So I was reading As Good as Dead before bed every single day in college. In my first 2 weeks of college, I would say, I tried to bring it on my orientation, but it was extremely hard to read out in the wild. but I really enjoyed reading it like as part of my bedtime routine every single day, like to settle into college. And I feel like it was so incredibly fun. Like I love having this bedtime routine, but I feel like in college it is really hard to keep reading as part of your routine. I noticed a significant decrease in my reading like once I got to college, which is so terrible. I wish to read more, but I feel like college is just so busy, and now that I don't have a very long commute time as I did in high school, I feel like I have less time to read or listen to audiobooks. So sometimes I listen to audiobooks when I'm out on a run or a walk, but reading, I still struggle to find time to read outside of that like bedtime reading, which I also try to not make too long to have a good schedule. But if you guys have any tips for reading in college and still maintaining reading a lot, because as you can see, I read quite a lot, not like those booktubers that read like hundreds of pages, I mean hundreds of books, like 200 or 300 books every year. I can't physically do that, even if I was not doing anything else in my life. Well, maybe possibly, but my point is I'm in college and usually I read a lot, like around 50 to 60 books a year, and I think I'm gonna struggle with that a lot next year, like about having a busy schedule in college. So if you have any tips about prioritizing reading in college, please let me know. So yeah, that's a little interlude, but as good as said, it was brilliant, it was mysterious, it was scary, it is so fast-paced, it keeps you on your toes. Absolutely amazing. So in 8th place, we have The Teachers, a year inside America's most vulnerable, important profession. And it's by Alexandra Robbins, an absolutely amazing author that has also written other amazing books like The Overachievers, The Secret Lives of Driven Kids. And this was an amazing book that talks about the life of teachers, but specifically because Alexandra Robbins, she went in disguise into a school in order for an entire year in order to investigate like what teachers do on the day-to-day and report on their lives. I feel like this book, it gives a lot, this like documentary accuracy that this book provides is really amazing. And I specifically read it because I consider the option of becoming a teacher in the future, and I feel like it is so interesting to read like the life of teachers, what they struggle with, their day-to-day routines, how important and how meaningful their work is. I love how this book is structured in terms of months. So it talks about an entire school year, like from August, September, like it's structured by each month. And in each month, the author kind of focuses on a different topic. Like she talks about different kinds of teachers, like librarians, special ed teachers, math teachers, English language arts teachers, and talking about a different teacher that teaches different things in each month and with a different focus. I feel like it's super interesting. Also, the documentary accuracy of it is absolutely brilliant since it gives you so much insight into the actual lives of teachers. Of course, since she experienced literally their lives for an entire year. So it's super well researched. That's not even a point in contention. And the storytelling is absolutely brilliant as well. I was so interested throughout the entire book, even though it's a very long book. I forgot how many pages, but it's a very long book, but it doesn't feel long. It is so interesting. And yeah, it just gives you a lot of insight. And as you read it, I feel like, at least as I read it, I felt a lot more disillusioned about the profession. Not in the sense, like, of course, I wanted to teach because I enjoy the act of teaching others and because I think it's something super meaningful to pass down this joy of knowledge and this joy in learning to the next generation, as a lot of teachers think so. And it's sounding super cliche right now, I know, but like, I wanted to teach because of this reason. But then this book tells you about all the structural issues that prevent teachers who have these great intentions and who put in amazing efforts from doing those things that they want to, especially inside the context of American education and American public schools. So I think that this book is super interesting and it's a great insight into the realities of teaching as opposed to just sunshine and rainbows. Like, oh, you get to spend time with kids, you get to teach them amazing knowledge, you get to make kids love learning, then you get 2 months off for summer and 1 month off during winter, like amazing holidays. No, it's not just sunshine and rainbows. There's so many structural constraints. There are like parent issues, there are issues with the school board, there are issues with the principal, there are issues with societal appreciation, like society doesn't appreciate teachers as much as they should be. There are issues, of course, with pay, like teachers are not known to be the most prestigious or lucrative profession. Like, I feel like most people, when they're in college and stuff, at least they want to be, I don't know, consultants or lawyers or in big tech or things like that. And nobody really tells you, oh, you'll be a teacher, you'll be rich. Like, it's just not something that happens. And sadly, de-incentivizes a lot of people, even myself. Like, I have to admit, like, it's a big issue. And teachers are just not being appreciated as much for the job that they're doing. And they have to fulfill all of these roles as, like, a therapist, an adult that children can confide in, a teacher, of course, and teaching, but also management, in planning things, in doing all their administrative work that you don't see outside of the classroom. And so I think that teachers get so much hate that they don't deserve, and also do not get appreciated enough. And especially me, I grew up loving school and loving a lot of my teachers, and so I think that this is such an important book to read, and if everybody read this book, society would be infinitely better. So that's my rant about The Teacher Is a Year Inside America's Most Vulnerable, Important Profession. That is number 8 on my list of my 10 favorite books of the year. And moving on to number 7, it is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, but yeah, oh wow, deep breath before I talk about this book. When Breath Becomes Air is such a heartbreaking and sad book. It's about, the author is someone who graduated with all these amazing degrees, is a neurosurgeon, so he has this prestigious job, but he also has several degrees in English literature. He loves writing, he loves poetry, but also, like, is extremely dedicated to the medical field. When it seemed like his life was going on this perfect trajectory towards the absolute peak of what human existence can become, he was diagnosed with the last stage of cancer, like stage 4 cancer, I think. And that was an absolutely devastating turn in his life. He's this super talented, super smart, super kind person, but then he was diagnosed with cancer, and the doctor let him know that he only has, in very vague terms, that he only has a few weeks or months to live. And this is an absolutely devastating book. But other than just being sad, I don't think this book is just one to make you cry, or of course I think it's very likely that you cry while you're reading it, but it's not just a sad book, but it's like, its central theme, I feel like, revolves around how under these conditions of having your life going on a perfect trajectory and then realizing this devastating turn, like, what makes life meaningful to live? Like, why are we living? And does this diagnosis mean that life is not worth living anymore, or that it's not worth it to strive for these amazing achievements, because something like this could happen to literally anyone? And I feel like this is such an important topic because it makes us think of all of our mortality, and just a lot of questions about what pursuits are meaningful, about what is meaningful to think about, and whether a lot of the things that we stress about or think about in our daily lives are actually not that important in the face of death. And I think that I read this at the perfect time too. I read this in March, late March and April, when I went on a road trip with my family and also got accepted to Duke. So these important life events were happening. I was revising for my IB exams and also feeling kind of that stress, but also a lot of my life was changing, and it was a very hard time to navigate. And it really made me think about what is worth it, what isn't, and how to navigate life when mortality is something inevitable. So some of my favorite quotes from this are, I began to realize that coming in such close contact with my own mortality had changed both nothing and everything. Before my cancer was diagnosed, I knew that someday I would die, but I didn't know when. After the diagnosis, I knew that someday I would die, but I didn't know when. But now I knew it acutely. The problem wasn't really a scientific one. The fact of death is unsettling, that there is no other way to live. So I feel like this diagnosis, like, as the author reflects on it, it didn't really mean that much in the way that we live life. So why would we live so differently if we were just navigating our normal lives versus in a situation like his? And I think it opens up so many questions about the meaning of life and how we would live. And I feel like it's also so interesting that most of us, like, that are healthy and very grateful to be. Like, in our normal lives, we don't think about our mortality that often. We know that we are mortals and that we would die someday, but we don't really know that we would die someday. Like, at some point we would die, because we don't think about our mortality often. But then I feel like if we think about it more, and if it informs more of our decisions, and more if it informs more of our decisions in our daily life, it would be a lot different. And I feel like it's an important thing to think about, like, rather than just thinking about the mundane every day. Like, if we think about questions like our mortality, then what does that inform us about the life that we really want to live right now? Sorry guys, it's already getting dark, so I had to go turn on my light. And the second quote I wanted to share from When Breath Becomes Air is, literature not only illuminates another's experience, it provided, I believe, the richest material for moral reflection. My brief forays into the formal ethics of analytic philosophy felt as dry as bone, missing the messiness of weight of real human life. So I think another aspect of this book, beyond the life and death discussion that were really heavy but meaningful, is the author's character, as like the author's identity as both like a medical professional, as a surgeon, as well as someone who has studied literature abundantly, as a writer and someone passionate about literature. Because I think that I share part of that identity of loving STEM, loving the sciences, especially maths, wanting to discover the world in a rigorous scientific way, but also loving the part of human expression. And I feel like literature today is really not as appreciated, because people think that, oh, you need to get a high-paying job. And so, like, literature, how is studying an English degree supposed to get you to do that? But I think that part of it is a balance between the two. The way to discover the world, of course, is both with empiricism from the sciences, as well as with human feeling and moral reflection, and the importance of thinking about human life and what makes us human and what makes our human life important. That literature really gives us, like, the human condition, if you will. And I feel like that's such an important point, and also part of the author's identity that I really identify with, and feel like I could take some of those lessons into my own life and realize the importance of interdisciplinary learning and the balance of the arts with the sciences. So, When Breath Becomes Air was an amazing book. And in sixth place, we have The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. So this is a nonfiction book as well, and it talks about the origins of where our food came from and how it came to be that way. For example, it talks about how our ancestors ate, how we ate during the Industrial Revolution, how we eat now, as well as it talks about different food groups like corn, like meat, like vegetables, and where they come from nowadays. It talks about very interesting things about the production of food, like the spring mix that you see in that you eat in your salads and that you see in the greens aisle, like how spring mix and pre-washed vegetables came to be, how that became whole business. It's so interdisciplinary. It talks about economics, it talks about biology of the plants, it talks about chemistry, the chemical reactions in them. It talks about history, because it's about the history of food, as well as how food and human civilization interacts. All in all, it's just such an interesting book if you're interested in learning more about how our food came from, how food informs our life, as well as the importance of food and how food plays such an integral role in our health in the modern day. For me, I'm really interested in that because I am super interested in nutrition, even though I'm not studying anything related to biology or chemistry or economics of that matter. But I feel like it's always important to have some general knowledge, especially I love reading nonfiction about the things that I don't study in school or my formal education, because I think that it is so important to broaden your interests, as well as having this like broad scope of knowledge that you know a lot of things and you can talk about them. And I just feel like it's really interesting to learn about the origins of food, and it makes you more aware of what you're putting into your body. Like, what you think is just purely meat maybe is super processed, or what you think is like just meat that our ancestors ate, I don't know, thousands of years ago. It's really not, because now like animals are being fed antibiotics so that they can eat more and be produced faster, and that's the reality of how the economy works. And also, when you think that you're eating, for example, ketchup, you think that it doesn't have sugar in it, even though it has so much sugar, has corn syrup and everything. Corn is in, I don't remember the exact percentage, but like around 80 to 90% of our foods. Like, it is in so much of our foods in the form of corn syrup, corn sugars, like not exactly the corn on the cob itself. Like, corn itself is super healthy, but corn, like high fructose corn syrup, is in so much of our food. And I feel like it's so important to be aware of these things and know what the origins of what you're putting into your body. And also I just find it so incredibly interesting. Like it talks about how like this is something that I feel once I've moved to America, is that like American diets, they have very large portions. The first times I ate in America, I can never finish my food, even though usually I'm a person who eats a lot. And that's something like in effect that the book talks about. Supersizing, yeah, it's called supersizing our food. These corporations, when they started producing, they realized that they're producing more food than the population can possibly eat. And so what they did was something that's really terrible for our health but really good for their economic gains, which is that they started making portion sizes a lot larger, where for example a medium coffee would cost $4, where it has a large coffee that is 2 times the size would cost $4.50. And so that when you're looking at that, you're like, well, why don't I buy the large coffee? And that is really a strategy for these companies to increase the price of the medium and the small portions and to make the large portions super large. That is why when you go to McDonald's or something, the medium fry is never worth your dollar, because it's supposed to make you want to buy the large one. And in the same way, the restaurants give you a lot of food for what seems like an amount of money that's worth it, when you're really just not able to eat that much food. Like your stomach is pretty much the size of your fist, and the amount of that food that we eat on the day-to-day, it's much more than what's supposed to fit in our stomach. And so the concept of supersizing I thought was also so incredibly interesting, and this book talks about countless concepts like that, about why the modern obesity epidemic exists, about why our food is so much less nutritious than their original version that grew on trees or ran in the wilds, about all of these concepts around food, and I feel like it's just absolutely fascinating. Okay, fifth on the list, in fifth place, we have To Live by Yu Hua. And this is a Chinese book, so I don't know how many of you would actually want to read it. I believe there are definitely English versions translated, but I'm just going to talk about it briefly because honestly, I absolutely loved it. I read it during summer vacation where I was in China and wanted to read a lot more books in different languages, including Chinese, and to reconnect with my mother language. So To Live is a book about life in rural China, like about a century ago, and it talks about a lot of the political effects on people. It talks about a family and a main character's daily life, because it's called To Live, so it doesn't talk about anything especially dramatic or meaningful, but the book itself, it's very tragic. It's about the character that started growing up in a very affluent household. They had all these servants and they were of very upper class. But then afterwards he started gambling, the family lost everything, people died, like close family members died, and every time he tries to build a better life, like something starts to go wrong. And it's almost like, I'm not sure if you've seen that really like famous TikTok video or like YouTube short of that person going up the stairs in a trampoline, and it's like every time he collapses onto the trampoline but then goes back a stair and then he goes higher, and that's like the progression of life, or people think about it as a metaphor for healing. But then this is a very tragic story of a life that started what seems like to be up here, like everything was going well, and the life slowly descended into poverty and into bad things, and bad things happened and it was traumatic and everything. But actually the author's point is that to live, it works like this. Like it's living, it's not a straight line upwards, it's not supposed to be a straight horizontal line either, and it's supposed to be of many struggles, but that's what makes life meaningful. And all of our lives are kind of like this. We don't make any impact, we go through hard things, but in the end, it's still worth living. So I think it's an incredibly powerful book. It was very sad, but I think the lesson was worth it. Guys, I just remembered that I completely forgot to talk about Fun Home by Alison Bechdel, even though it is ranked number 4 and honestly one of the best books that I read this year. And it is just incredible. It is a graphic novel, and it depicts this family where the son and the father are gay, but they were closeted for a long time since it wasn't socially acceptable. And this family runs a business of they run this funeral business, but then they called their house Fun Home, which was the place that they run the funeral business. And even though it's anything but fun, but it's just kind of like that name, that like ironic name. And the reason why I think it's so interesting is because it depicts those family dynamics so deeply on such interesting levels that uses the interplay of like images and text super effectively. Like honestly, before this year, I thought that graphic novels were just like for kids, like Superman or whatever. Like I never even read graphic novels as a kid because I didn't think they were real books. But just this year, I discovered how important and how like powerful it can be to analyze graphic novels, and then not all graphic novels are superficial. A lot of them are actually very deep and have a lot of like depth in their content, like Fun Home. Like it talks about this very interesting story of it's about LGBTQ, it's about family dynamics, it's about how a family lives together and the relationships within a family. It's about toxic masculinity and the narratives that boys and men have been told that prevent them from accepting themselves as who they are, which is incredibly sad. It's one of the panels that I remember very clearly is, I'll try to put it up on the screen, but I'm not sure if I can find it because I don't have the physical copy right now. But it is this. It shows the house. It uses a lot of graphic weight, and it shows each of the rooms being divided up, and the family members each doing their own thing in their rooms. Like it's almost as if they live together peacefully, but also rarely interact with each other. And on many levels I feel deeply relatable, but other than that I feel like it's just a really good depiction, and it shows a lot of the more complex relationships within a family. Like other than, I feel like a lot of the times in literature, families either depicted as like perfectly happy or deeply like problematic and traumatic, but like families like this where some of the traditional values that are problematic are kind of ingrained, but also it's not like a it's not a toxic environment either, and it's kind of a home, but also there are some aspects that are wrong about it, and it talks about very intimate and vulnerable issues. It feels very personal, and it completely revolutionized my idea on graphic novels. I think just the images, they add so much to the storytelling, and they add a lot of depth to the storytelling too, instead of subtracting from it. So absolutely love that. So in third place, we have an equally, if not more, sad book, and it's called A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So this book, I can't even begin to talk about it because it's just so hard to talk about, and it was even harder to read. Like, this book took me an entire year to read this. I started reading it in the summer of 2024, and I finished it this year in July, I think the summer of 2025. Not because it was slow moving or because I was bored, not at all. It was because it was just so emotionally hard to read. Like, it's about these four really good friends that met when they were 20 something, trying to build a career, finishing off college, and their lives, but also especially one friend's life. That one friend is called Jude, and his trauma, his past, and how that trauma is carried with him as he grows older, and it continues until their lives in the 60s when they're quite old. And I'm pretty sure you've heard people talk about this book, but it's just incredibly sad. And but part of the reason why it's ranked third in my reads of this year is because it is so incredibly good and so touching. It's like, I don't think I can possibly explain this feeling, but almost like this feeling that you're growing old with someone that you only know through the pages of a book. And I feel like that's something so magical about reading, that you get to know these characters so well, and the book is extremely character driven. Almost nothing happens, but like there is like one or two plot twists, but almost nothing happens in the plot, but that doesn't take away from the book at all. These characters are like old friends from the time that you're reading this book. And since it took me so long to read it, I feel like I was growing up together with the book, and all of the all of the sadness and the sad and horrible things that have happened in the book, those are just part of, I feel like, also a way for me to like look at life in a way that is so intimate and so vulnerable from the pen of Hanya Yanagihara that I could never do so in real life. And I feel like it was a surreal experience. I didn't feel like I was reading it. I didn't feel like I was in it either, but like it was surreal. I've never read anything like it, and it's just incredible, I think. Like, you can only experience it for yourself. There isn't like a particular quote that was meaningful to me, but I feel like the book itself, it builds on that progression, on the friends growing old, how the relationships change, how trauma plays into all of this. And I just feel like you need to experience it for yourself. It was an experience. It was a year-long experience for me that, like, you know, usually I finish a book in a few weeks or even like a day or something. But like this book took an entire year, but I just let the pace take itself. Like, I didn't force myself to read it too much when I knew that I couldn't emotionally handle it. And I feel like this was the pace that my body and my mind wanted to read it, and it was honestly perfect. It was such a unique journey. And before I recommend it to anybody, like, I'm saying I absolutely loved A Little Life, but I'm not recommending it to you. Like, if you want to experience it, it is absolutely a surreal experience. If you don't think you're in the right place to read it, please read the trigger warnings before you read A Little Life. I Yeah, I would be very cautious before recommending this to everyone, but just personally, I loved the reading experience. And okay, so second on my list of books that are my favorite 10 of 2025. In second place, we have The House of My Mother by Sherry Frankie. So this, oh my gosh, why are all the books I'm talking about so sad? I swear I'm not a sad person in real life, but I feel like I just read a lot of sad books in my reading. Like, The House of My Mother is the memoir of Sherry Frankie. It is about her life, her childhood growing up in a Mormon household with her mother Ruby Frankie, as well as her father Kevin Frankie, and this incredibly evil, like, person who is disguised as a counselor but really just did horrible abusive things to children, called Jody Hildebrand. And House of My Mother is about her experiences inside that house. It is about how her mother started the YouTube channel that is incredibly famous, the family vlogging channel called 8 Passengers, and how vlogging has exacerbated the struggles inside her life. It is very vulnerable. It's about family trauma, her childhood trauma. The book also talks about how family vlogging is so detrimental to children. It doesn't give them any privacy, and how this person Jody entered their lives, and how she then went to college, but Jody did all these terrible things to her younger siblings. It is very insightful. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of family vlogging, especially with younger children. Like, family vlogs, they often have young children, and one quote is that, like, in today's world, like, kids are content and content is king, but we should, like, and that illustrates that, like, we should really not exploit kids to create content. And really something that's incredibly cruel, and it talks about all her trauma inside it. And there's this beautiful quote that says, sometimes a family isn't just what you're born into, it's also what you build in the aftermath of loss. And in this quote, Sherry was talking about her relationship with her incredibly good relationship with with her teacher, Mr. Haymond, as well as then afterwards she also got to know his wife, Mrs. Haymond, and her relationship with the Haymonds is something incredibly beautiful that she mentions at different points of this book. Like, when she was in school, she felt like she was jealous of the Haymonds kids because they seemed like they had such an understanding parents, and then afterwards, like, the Haymonds gave her this refuge when all the chaos with her family and Jody was going on. And so I think that's an absolutely beautiful story about how even when family isn't what you want it to be, you are able to build, like, find your own found family and find your home outside of it. And I am currently writing an essay on that and the House Bernarda Alba, so stay tuned. It'll be posted on my Substack. Finally, in first place of my favorite 10 books of 2025, drumroll please, it is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Yes. Yeah, The Perks of Being a Wallflower is brilliant. It is not only an amazingly written book with beautiful language and really good plot, a really good coming of age novel, but it is also a book that makes me personally feel seen. For example, the quote, "He is a wallflower, you see things, you keep quiet about them, and you understand." Like, that is a quote that I have remembered, like, forever. I keep coming back to it throughout this year, and I just think it is absolutely beautiful. The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I read it right at the end of my senior year. I think it was around April and May that I read The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I first listened to it on audio, and then I was like, I have to actually read the book too. And So yeah, I read it at that time, and I feel like it was absolutely the perfect time to read it because it talks about so many concepts of so many themes of coming of age, of about loss, like grieving a period that you're about to end. Like one of the quotes was, and at that moment, I swear we were infinite. So some moments we think are infinite and we think would never end, but they end so quickly and we can never return back to them. And I feel like that longing is something that I feel so deeply, and that I feel like I've read at the perfect time because honestly, like, Charlie is someone who's in his freshman year of high school and hanging out with a bunch of seniors and experiencing that, like, this really good friendship that's about to end. And then I was reading it as a senior in high school, and it's almost as if I was in a conversation with my younger self, even though I've never experienced freshman year. But I feel like, and I have a lot of very good friends that were freshmen, and so I think that reading this book, it made me feel so, it was just the perfect time, honestly. Like, I don't have the words for it, honestly, but like, feeling this, reading this book, it was like the perfect way to understand an ending to the chapter of my life and to deal with that ending. And I know that I will return this book so much more and read it so much more times. But I feel like, because it's one of my favorite ones of all time, not just of 2025. But I feel like the fact that I graduated high school in 2025 and read this book, like, it was absolutely beautiful. There are so many themes about loss, about friendship, about love, about how we keep our memories, how we deal with growing up. And I feel like that's something so hard yet so meaningful. Like some quotes like, I would die for you, but I won't live for you. And this moment will just be another story someday. Absolutely beautiful quotes. I will be remembering those forever. And I just realized it has gotten dark while I was filming when it was light before. And those are my top 10 favorite books of 2025. So yeah, I really hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. Oh yeah, also I wanted to do some honorable mentions. My favorite texts that I studied in 2025. So these books are based on how much I liked when I read them. They're mostly just, yeah, I think all of them are books that are read for pleasure because I don't know, those just tend to be more enjoyable, like, to read, you know. That's kind of obvious. But I also wanted to do a quick shout out to the texts that I loved studying in 2025, because even though I might not have had the most fun reading them, the texts I studied have had such a big impact on my life, especially the ones I studied during the IB. Like, interestingly, not in university, but I feel like my university course was more about theory, and it was a lot more formalist than I wanted to be. Then because like I feel like the texts that I studied through a historicist lens, they tend to be more memorable, whereas studying it through a formalist lens tends to be more just looking at the textual features and not discussing enough about their themes and their impacts, and more through their theoretical lens too. But I just wanted to mention 3 texts, including The Awakening by Kate Chopin, The House of Bernarda Alba by Federico Garcia Lorca, and A View from the Bridge by Arthur Miller. Those are my favorite texts that I studied during the IB. And now I'm writing a comparative essay between The House of My Mother and The House of Bernarda Alba, and I feel like those go super well together with with houses as their main characters and the home but not really a place of belonging as a setting. I am giving away way too much about my essay, but I will definitely put that essay out soon on my Substack so that you guys can read it, and that's so exciting. And yeah, those are my 10 favorite books of 2025. So let me know what you guys think. I hope that this gives you guys some ideas about recommendations of books that you can read in 2026, and Happy New Year! Bye!